Irvin D. Yalom, The Gift of Therapy, an open letter to a new generation of therapists and their patients. When people turn to therapy, it's often because they're looking for ways to cope with life struggles. The questions they ask themselves about life, freedom, isolation, and death are deeply personal, but they can have profound consequences on their personal relationships. The therapist's goal is to help them manage these feelings and, whenever possible, help repair the broken bonds in their relationships. In this blink to Irvin D. Yalom's The Gift of Therapy, which is geared toward therapists, we explore how the relationship between the therapist and the patient can serve as a conduit to dealing with existential and relationship issues. You'll learn how emphasizing this model relationship is more important than diagnostics and how self-disclosure can build trust. The importance of the therapeutic relationship. As patients start therapy, two things matter. The first involves what they're going to tell their therapist about their situation. Let's call that the content. The second is the relationship the patient and the therapist are going to build. We'll call this the process. Of these two things, the process matters more than the content. Why? First, it'll help the therapist get to know the patient better. This intimacy will make the patient more comfortable with sharing. Second, as a relationship with the therapist grows, the patient is likely to act the way they do in their daily life. This will help the therapist identify areas that the patient really needs to work on. Therapists should see their patients as fellow travelers. As humans, we're all essentially dealing with the same issues. Practicing this level of empathy results in effective therapy. Therapy should also be an engaging experience that doesn't shy away from the negative things that have happened to the patient. The challenge lies in finding the right time to tackle them in a way that highlights the positives, so that these positive lessons can then be carried forward. In short, the therapist should collect the content, but always remember to use it to engage the patient. That therapeutic act, the interaction between therapist and patient, is how healing happens. The here and now. If you're a therapist, there's a simple yet powerful tool at your disposal: the here and now. In other words, it's everything that happens in the course of a therapy session. The here and now is an excellent guide to your patient's other relationships. To tap into this resource, you as a therapist must bring all your observational powers to the interaction. Watch how your patient opens the door, sits, starts a conversation, or expresses emotion. Examine how their words and actions make you feel. That's a good way to understand how they make their friends feel. When they talk, grow rabbit ears. You'll learn a lot about their expectations and frustrations. Are they particular about clothes or how their environment looks? Do they have any quirks? The nonverbal signals are equally important. Use the here and now to tackle issues as they happen. If, in the course of therapy, a patient keeps trying to show off their intelligence by making long intellectual arguments, tactfully ask them how they think their friends feel about that kind of behavior. Then help them understand how that might be pushing people away from them. Doing this often will energize the therapy sessions and improve the process. It will also help you understand the unique views, emotions, and patterns of each patient. This will move you away from rigid blanket diagnoses to customized care. There's a lot that can be gleaned from a patient's past. That's useful, of course. But what's happening right now contains more relevant data to how they react to everyday issues. Remember to avoid judgment when framing questions for here and now analyses. Your aim is to help the patient make the connection between their actions and the way society reacts to them. Any positive change will reinforce the learned habit and change the opinion of their friends. And eventually, those new opinions will make the patient feel good about themselves. Using self-disclosure to improve therapy. Irvin Yalom's storied career is filled with examples of how being open with his patients led to breakthroughs in therapy. When he was anxious about going to a scheduled radio interview, he shared his anxiety with a patient who had similar concerns. Another time, he wondered how much a patient was getting from therapy, and they both agreed to exchange feedback in writing. These interactions provided engagement and input that led to better outcomes. Self-disclosure will help you get more out of your patient, which in turn will give you more content to work with. Sharing also shows your patient that others are plagued by the same things they're worried about. They're not cursed or unique in their suffering. Some patients come to therapy with the belief that their therapist is a magical superhuman. Manage these expectations by highlighting your shared humanity. However, only share experiences that will help the therapy process. Avoid anything that could make you liable or uncomfortable if it got out. A therapist is bound by confidentiality. The same rules don't apply to the patient. When you're analyzing a patient's revelation in the here and now, discuss the content, but also spend time working through the process. In this case, the process would be the act of revelation. Ask why the patient had the revelation, why they had it at that particular time, how it felt, and how long they've been thinking about it. Notice whether they're inclined to share more after this particular revelation. Focus on the parts of the content that provide the most engaging conversations. It's better to delay feedback on a subject until it's relevant in the here and now. You can help a patient shed negative behaviors by waiting until they exhibit the opposite positive behavior. This is a clever way of minimizing resistance. The next step is helping them understand how to replicate this positive feeling when they meet their friends. And if the patient's revelation has helped you, tell them. Affirmation will improve the way they regard themselves. How to handle existential issues. Existential issues are questions about the meaning and purpose of life. Some of these themes include freedom, isolation, and death. The recurring emotions that go hand in hand with these issues may appear stronger after tragic events, but they're always lurking beneath the subconscious. In tackling these concerns, we first need to understand that they're universal. Everyone everywhere will face these issues. They shouldn't be seen as taboo because they won't go away. If anything, knowing that you're going to die should encourage you to live your best life. And what is my best life, you may ask? Well, your best life is a one you live by just being yourself. That's how you eliminate the anxiety of trying to meet others' expectations. When bad things happen, use them as awakening experiences and opportunities to reset and continue on the path to being your authentic self. The meaning of life is complex. Everyone has their own version of it, grounded in some story they've told themselves. But rather than worry about meaning, spend your time engaging with the things that inspire you. That immersive experience of life will push your anxieties about meaning to the side. What about personal freedom? The best way to enjoy our freedom is to take responsibility for our actions. Being decisive about our lives will improve our outcomes. Ultimately, our actions affect the way others treat us. The therapist's role in this situation is to help the client understand how not choosing means they're letting others choose for them. When you give up your agency, you become an accomplice in your own suffering. In general, therapists shouldn't make decisions for patients or friends. Instead, their job is to offer responsible counsel. For instance, people sometimes hesitate because choosing one thing means they have to forfeit others. You can help your patients understand what they gain by making a choice and encourage them to probe the privileges they're unwilling to give up by holding onto the things that hurt them. In cases where advice is crucial to the healing, focus on the process, the dynamic relationship between you and the patient. That's what they'll remember, and that's what will help them the most. How to use dreams during therapy. Dr. Yalom has often used the dreams of his patients to gain insight into their lives, find suppressed memories, and learn about their fears and expectations over the course of therapy. To take advantage of dreams, he advises the following. Pay attention to the first dream your patient shares. It usually captures the core issues plaguing them. As the therapy progresses, the sessions might actually start to distort the dreams, making it harder to grasp the real issues. It's quite easy to forget dreams, so ask your patients to record them as soon as they wake up. Also, narrating a dream during a session can make it come alive. Now, let's look at the content of the patient's dream. The key here is not waste time trying to interpret the full dream. Instead, focus only on the parts that are relevant to the here and now. Use these parts to talk about what's going on in the patient's life at that moment. If parts of a dream are interesting but not relevant to what you're working on at that particular time, shelf them until those issues come up. Dreams can also open up other important feelings or past events in a patient's life that can influence the course of therapy. Probe events and feelings that surface as they relate to the here and now. When a patient dreams about you, it can shed light on the nature of your therapeutic relationship. But the therapist figure can also be a stand-in for a dominant relationship that's affecting a patient's life. Analyzing the dream in this way can reveal deeper worries about the nature of previous relationships or interactions where the power dynamics put the patient at a disadvantage. Even as you make use of dreams, remember that the dynamic process between you and the patient is what you're after. Psychotherapy as a dynamic vocation. If you had to cut down a tree with an axe, would you get right to it, or spend time sharpening your axe first? Irvin Yalom's body of work centers around the idea that psychotherapy provides ample room for creativity and intellectual fulfillment, but should be grounded in deep reflection and preparation. Diverging from the stereotype of a cold psychoanalytic exchange between therapist and patient, he encourages therapists to revel in their role as healers who elevate their patients toward growth. According to Dr. Yalom, every process that is safe, builds trust, and works for the patient should be explored. To prepare themselves for this role, therapists must start with self-examination. This should include personal therapy to deal with their own demons, and group therapy with peers to share experiences and the benefits of companionship. Therapy for the therapist should happen periodically over the course of their careers. This dynamism should include home visits when necessary. Seeing a patient's house can benefit the therapy process in a couple ways. For one, it gives the therapist new material to work with. It also shows a patient that they care. In some cases, a patient can be motivated to change simply because the therapist proved to them that they matter. In the same spirit, Dr. Yalom is fine with appropriate physical touch, like a handshake, if it serves the therapy. Therapists can learn a lot from a handshake, and even more from talking about it. If they think it'll improve therapy, therapists can even talk to the important people in a patient's life to get a second opinion that the patient might have consciously or unconsciously left out. But as a therapist, you shouldn't bring a spouse or intimate person into therapy sessions. Your loyalty lies with your patient. As a final note, therapists should stay up to date on the latest research. Neuroscience findings, for instance, have revealed complex connections between genetics and behavior. Understanding the links between genetics, environmental influence, and a patient's thoughts and actions can make it easier to empathize and find tailored solutions that work. You've just finished our blink to The Gift of Therapy by Irvin D. Yalom. Here's a short recap. When people consult a therapist, they're usually dealing with personal issues or trying to understand their relationships with others. During therapy, they'll reveal a lot about their situation, which therapists can use to establish a dynamic relationship. Ideally, patients can learn to transfer the positive lessons from these interactions to other relationships and lead a more fulfilling life.
Well, before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to Books in Blinks and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, check out the other titles in our playlist. I'm Pedro from Books in Blinks, and I hope to see you here again.